This looks like a crowd old enough to remember the Jetsons, right? Okay. I want to talk about master planning. I want to talk about the Jetsons and what we've learned. And one of the biggest mistakes that are made in master planning right now is we spit shine the status quo. In other words, we don't think about what it'll be like next century like the Jetsons did. We're too focused on today. The other mistake that's made is that we assume that the trends that are occurring up to this point are going to be ones that roll into the future, where the Jetsons clearly told us that the change in generation is going to be significant and it's going to impact life throughout the world, which is where they were residing. The consumer today has sent us a message. We tend to ignore it, which is if you build a living unit in the 1970s, 1980s, or 1990s, I kind of think it looks like this. If you build something that's contemporary and meets my designs and expectations, I'll move in. So let's talk about the Jetsons. 1962, 1963 was the first season, really the only season of the original one. It was based on a book called 1975, which was 13 years in the future, but they portrayed it as being a 100-year future. Well, that becomes important because when we think about master planning, we're never thinking about 100 years, but 13 doesn't sound so bad. Well, some of the things that we dreamed about as part of the Jetsons came true. And the lesson we learn is, even though we don't have flying cars in 2013, that a lot of the things that we talked about that they portrayed in 1962 came true. And that's part of master planning, which is if we allow ourselves to dream about a future that may be 20 or 30 years, maybe 100 years from now, a good chunk of it's going to come true. The video chat's a great example. Today, the grandmother talking to her granddaughter on FaceTime is probably one of the easiest applications on any iPhone, and yet in 1962 it seems so far-fetched. Rosie the robot was vacuuming floors back in 1962, and it took 40 years until 2002 for the introduction of the iRobot, the Roomba, but it's here, and they got that right. And the last one that I wanted to exhibit this afternoon is the talking alarm clock. It's my favorite because in 1962, we thought about it. Now we can roll over and yell at the alarm clock, "Shut up." 3 lessons I want to leave you with. One is that we spend an awful lot of time asking our current residents what they want in a master plan. It's a really significant mistake. I mean, it's important to get input, but we should be talking to the consumers who aren't here. Let me explain why. If you ask the owner of the car on the upper left-hand side what he wants in his dream car, he's probably going to come back with something that looks like the one on the bottom right. If we ask the next generation beyond that what they want, it'll look like this. And that's the importance of asking the consumer we don't have. The other takeaway is imagine the unimaginable. When pigs fly, well, not so much in the Jetsons, but what the Jetsons did was they imagined the unimaginable and then they walked backward from that, and that's what they came up with as the projection of the future. And we can do that. Here's an example, a great example of a cultural center that was built on a campus, and the question is, who would have thought that the programs would be so successful that most, if not all, would be oversubscribed? We would have if we allowed ourselves to imagine what might have been unimaginable, that 500 people would be interested in a program, an educational component. But the theater is built for 50 people. So the strategic value of that center is diminished as a result of not thinking like the Jetsons back in 1962, trying to predict the future in 2062. And it also portrays itself when we transfer from the traditional dining program. We have the formal dining room, and then we offer the informal dining, and it typically doesn't take but a week for us to understand that we totally undersize the informal dining. So again, the unimaginable would be that we would have had everyone shift over to informal dining. I'm reminded that from the Jetsons, that competitive advantage when Cogswell Cogs and Spacely Sprockets battled every day, that the competitive advantage really wasn't sustainable. It was the advantage that's gained on a daily basis. And Rita Gunther McGrath has a great quote here, which is, recognizing that whatever we're doing today isn't going to drive future growth, and that's because everything's so competitive. So it's only when we innovate that we make significant change in a master plan that we get to what we need. A takeaway from this is that master plans should anticipate healthy disengagement so that we don't end up with buildings that are the best maintained, unmarketable facility. And it takes some boldness, like this 18-story nursing facility with 10 beds on the floor located in a key strategic part of the campus that took almost 13 years for someone to decide it needs to go away. So we might not think that that's healthy disengagement, but it is. And so the final lesson is that if we're able to imagine the unimaginable, if we're able to ask the right consumers what they're looking for and what they want, then we'll end up like the Jetsons rather than the Flintstones. Thank you very much.